All that morning, the Ninth Corps, ostensibly commanded by Major General Ambrose Burnside, had been positioning itself for the assault on the bridge. This attack was presumably intended to be a diversion. But once across the bridge, the Ninth Corps would be in a position to severely threaten Lee's right flank and cut off his only line of retreat. Because Lee had sent so many units from his right to support his left, this end of the line was dangerously weak, with only about 3,000 men, 400 of which defended the bridge itself. Including one division sent south on a flanking movement, Burnside had over 13,000 men with which to assault the position. But the Union side of the river was open and exposed, while the Confederate side had a sharp ridge with an old rock quarry that made for a superb defensive situation. Beginning at 10 a.m., Burnside sent 3 successive assaults right at the bridge. The rebels, led by General Robert Toombs, hammered them back all 3 times. On the 4th assault, with the Union flanking force threatening their rear, the rebel defenders broke. Burnside had his bridgehead. But he needed to resupply his men with ammunition and bring up his artillery. It was well after 3 p.m. before he could launch the final assault with 8,000 men on Lee's wide-open flank. Lee was understandably concerned. He had only 2,500 men with which to block the Federal onslaught. Just as Burnside was about to overrun the Confederate lines, he was suddenly and unexpectedly hit in the flank by General A.P. Hill's Light Division, just arriving from their all-day march from Harper's Ferry. Hill's tired and footsore rebels drove Burnside back to the river. Burnside lost 19% of his 13,000-man force capturing the bridge and withstanding A.P. Hill's counterattack. Lee's casualties were lighter, 1,100 of 7,000 men, but that was 15% of those engaged. As darkness fell on the fields and pastures around Sharpsburg, the fighting died out. Robert E. Lee skillfully shifted his regiments all day to the right place at the right time and countered every disjointed move George McClellan made. But he had used almost every available man in his army to do it. His army was fought out. McClellan, on the other hand, had over 10,000 fresh troops. Most of Fitzjohn Porter's 5th Corps and William B. Franklin's 6th Corps had sat idle all day and never fired a shot. But McClellan did not have the resolve to use them. Lee stood his ground on the 18th of September, waiting for what might have been the fatal blow from the Union forces. It would never come. The Confederates began to pull out of Sharpsburg later that night. And so the battle was over. More than 3,600 dead men on the field had turned this pastoral scene into a kind of a hellish nightmare. Hundreds more would die of their wounds in the weeks and months to follow. Every available building and barn in the area became a hospital to house the 17,000 wounded. 15% of the Union Army of the Potomac were casualties. The Confederates would suffer over 25% casualties. That was 1 out of every 4 men. So Lee led his battered army back across the Potomac River to the safety of Virginia. Abraham Lincoln pressed George McClellan for weeks to pursue the Army of Northern Virginia and finish it off. This, however, was in vain, and Lincoln was forced to relieve McClellan of his command on November 6, 1862.
He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never sound retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men.
The art of battlefield photography was born during the Civil War. Because of its proximity to Washington, D.C., and because it was still in Union hands when the battle was over, the ground at Antietam was some of the most photographed of the war. Even before the echoes of the guns had faded, Northern photographers descended on the field. In fact, This photo was reported to have been taken during the battle itself, the first of its kind. Famed photographer Matthew Brady dispatched a crew to Antietam that included the talented Alexander Gardner. Gardner made over 70 images of Antietam and the surrounding area. This was the first time that images were recorded of the battlefield dead before they could be buried, and it would be none like the country had ever seen before. Only weeks after the battle, Brady displayed the photos in his New York gallery. He called the exhibit "The Dead of Antietam," and gallery goers were fascinated and horrified as the deadly seriousness of war was shown to them in a way that none had ever experienced before. A review in the New York Times said of Brady's exhibit, "Mr. Brady has done something to bring home to us the terrible reality and earnestness of war. If he has not brought bodies and laid them in our dooryards and along our streets, he has done something very much like it."